Hello and welcome to another motorcycling video. For context, this is the second part of the video that I recorded yesterday where I was riding in the rain and going out to a place where I could start my morning run. I finished my morning run here and I'm on my way home, so it's about 8:15 or 8 o'clock, something like that in the morning, and I'm taking a ride around town to get home. Now I'm going to talk about these new vehicle emission standards that are coming into force, or hope to come into force, as of 1st of January next year in this video. So if you think I've heard enough about that and you don't want to hear me talk about that and all these things that are associated with it, by all means turn down the volume and then just enjoy the scenery. Otherwise stay tuned and hopefully I'll be able to answer or put some points of view to you. First of all, some disclosures. I don't work for a car company. I don't have any interest in car companies. I'm not trying to sell you a car. I'm not trying to promote one brand or model over another. I don't belong to a political party of any sort, and I don't belong to any environmental groups. Now, I'm saying all that out front, although I've said that a few times before, just to be clear that these are my personal opinions and I'm not paid to say them by anybody. They're based on my observations and thoughts about vehicles that I've seen. I haven't driven or experienced any of the vehicles that I'm going to talk about in this video. My knowledge of them and understanding of them is based on what I have seen other reviewers who work for the various car review companies like Cars.com, Drive.com, Cars Guide, Chasing Cars, Ludicrous Feed and so on, all of whom review cars and talk about them and have a lot more experience with these vehicles than I do. So the purpose of this video is just to talk about these new emission standards that are coming and some of the impact that may have on the car market. So if you've been following the news, you'll know that the Australian government is going to introduce new vehicle emission standards, which they hope will come into effect as of the 1st of January 2025. Now, I don't know where this legislation is in terms of the Parliament at the moment, but that's the plan. It may well be that the date at which this legislation starts to apply will be later. I know that the various motoring bodies, the Federated Chamber of Automotive Industries, which is the lobby group that represents car sellers in Australia, that is the manufacturers, they don't make any cars here but they sell their cars here, are saying that the date is too early and the restrictions are too great and we can't meet them and we need some more breathing space. But at the moment that's the plan. Now how this would work is that each vehicles are given an amount of carbon per kilogram, a kilogram of carbon per 100 kilometres or per kilometre or some measure like that, that says how much carbon they're allowed to emit. Now the average over all the vehicles that are sold by that company in Australia is the figure that will apply. Now because it's an average, some vehicles will be more fuel efficient and cleaner than others and they will be under that figure, and some cars will be over that because it's an average. But the idea is that as an average, the amount of carbon emitted by a fleet of cars by Toyota or Hyundai or Kia or whomever will reach that standard, whatever that standard may be. Now, if a vehicle if the fleet or a manufacturer such as Toyota or Kia, and I'm just using them as examples, doesn't meet the standard, they have a couple of options. One option is they could withdraw certain models that they currently sell in Australia from the market because they are too dirty, let's put it that way. A second option would be that they could say, well, all right, we will cop a fine. But if there's a fine, it's inevitable that the manufacturer will pass the fine on in the form of an increase in price of either all the vehicles in its fleet to spread that load across everyone who purchases vehicles from, or perhaps on just the vehicles that don't meet the standard. The third option would be for them to say, well, we're not meeting the standard at the moment, but we can buy credits from people who do meet the standard. Now, how would that apply? Well, let's think about that. If you are a manufacturer of electric vehicles and these emissions are measured at the tailpipe, they're not measured at the power station that's a tailpipe of the electric vehicle 100 kilometres away. They're measured at the tailpipe of the actual vehicle. And so the electric vehicles would all say with absolute confidence there are no emissions from our tailpipes because we don't have any tailpipes. Therefore, we are in carbon credit. So we can sell some of our credits to another manufacturer to help them to meet the standard. And of course, it's in the interests of Tesla and BYD and any other manufacturer who solely makes electric vehicles to put that point of view and say to other manufacturers who make internal combustion. The government strategy here is to say there are several things that they need to do or want to do. One is they want to reduce Australia's carbon emissions. They say that they've signed a bunch of agreements that say we will do our best to reduce our carbon emissions, and we say that this is that is the government, say it's a global problem. It's not a problem that's confined to North America or Europe or somewhere else. It's a global problem and everybody has to do their bit, and this is how we're going to do our bit. They say that meeting these standards should not be as difficult as car manufacturers make it out to be, simply because they say the standards already exist in Europe, in the United States, in Canada, in China, in Japan, in South Korea. In fact, the only countries where these emission standards don't exist are in Australia and Russia. So they say the standards already exist, and they further say, well, we know that you meet those standards in other places, so start selling in Australia the vehicles that you sell in those other countries that meet the standards, and you won't have a problem. And there is an argument to be made for that. The second part of their argument is to say they accept that there is going to be some difficulty with this issue. They accept that perhaps car prices might rise slightly, they say by about $500, but they also say that the savings that you make in fuel and the savings you make in servicing costs will more than offset the cost of the increase in the price. And the third part of their argument is to say, well, in order to meet these emissions, the manufacturers either have to start making more electric vehicles or making available in Australia more of the electric models which they currently don't make available in Australia. And if they make more electric vehicles available in Australia, then they will easily meet the standard. Now, are electric vehicles the future of motoring? I don't know. My crystal ball isn't that good. There may be other people who definitively know the answer to that, but I don't know the answer to that. What I can say is that they will certainly be in the mix of motoring options available to people. But some points to consider. There are about 15 million light passenger vehicles in Australia registered on Australian roads. So those are the cars that you and I drive, the ones that are in the parking lots at the shopping malls, the ones that drive themselves in the shopping malls apparently. Those are the light passenger vehicles. We sell about 1.2 million new vehicles every year. And at the last year for which there is data, 90,000 new electric vehicles were sold. So that is less than 10% of the fleet. And whilst that is a significant increase on the previous year, at 10% it's not making a big dent in the fleet at this stage. Can we assume that electric vehicles will continue to grow in demand exponentially? I'm not certain of that. There are lots of factors to do with availability, to do with models, to do with price that would affect people's decision to buy or not buy an electric vehicle. But even if that were the case, if every vehicle from now on that was sold was an electric vehicle, and theoretically, let's talk theoretically rather than, or hypothetically rather than factually, if every vehicle that was sold from now on was an electric vehicle and every electric vehicle that was sold replaced one ICE vehicle, it would take us 15 years or thereabouts to remove all the ICE vehicles from the roads. But because many families are 2-car families and even some cases 3-car families, a family might buy an electric vehicle, but they might also keep the ICE vehicle because they need a big car to get out and do the weekend trips or the getaways or the holidays or whatever. Or they might buy an electric vehicle but keep the petrol vehicle and give it to the kid who's just got a licence, or the kid who's just got a licence and a job buys themselves a new car or buys themselves a car, and that car is a petrol car or a diesel car rather than an electric vehicle. Now, so that brings us to the question of making more electric vehicles available in the Australian market. You can make as many cars as you like available in the Australian market, but selling them is a different thing. And so, whatever vehicles there are on the market need to be affordable. Now, according to CanStar, it's a market research company, Australians spend on average $39,857 on a new vehicle. So that means that any car that with electric or petrol has to somehow be in that sort of price range, 39,000, maybe 40, between 39 and 45,000 or thereabouts, for it to be affordable and for it to be bought in large numbers. So there have been, perhaps as a result of the government's announcement about these new emissions standards, there have been some announcements about new vehicles coming onto the Australian market. I talked about one of those recently when I talked about the Kia EV9, which in its base model, which remember no one buys the base model of any car, is $105,000. The middle version, which is a 7-seater crossover people mover SUV or something, is $120,000. I would venture to suggest to you that if you are a family of 7 or that needs a 7-seater, you don't have $120,000 to put down on a new electric vehicle. But here are some others that have come onto the market in the recent times that are electric vehicles, fully electric vehicles. There's the Hyundai Ioniq 5N. It's $111,000. Now, I accept, without question, that electric vehicles are expensive to make. Batteries are dear, the vehicles themselves are expensive to make. But surely as more and more vehicles come onto the market and more manufacturers are going either partially or in some cases fully electric, the costs of, first of all, the battery and the cost of the rest of the vehicle should come down, and the manufacturers should gain some economies of scale. But so we've got the Kia model, EV9, as I said, the Hyundai Ioniq 5N. We've also got the Kia EV5, which has been announced, but as far as I know, not yet available. It's around $60,000. Then we've got the Mini Countryman. Now, the Mini Countryman is marketed almost as an urban SUV, whatever that is. It seats 5. It comes in 6 variants, from the E-Core, which is the base model, and bearing in mind what I just said about the base model, that's $64,990 plus on-road costs. The E-Favoured is $70,990 plus on-road costs. Then in the more upmarket version, there is the SE Classic, which is $72,990, and the SE JCW Sports, which is $77,990. Now, I am sure that all of those cars are made with premium materials, have luxury feel about them, and are well made and well put together, and are quality materials, and all of those sorts of things. I'm not doubting any of those facts. The reviewers that I've seen have all said this is about the Ioniq, about the Kias that I've mentioned, about the Mini Countryman, that they're well-made cars, they've got quality materials, they've got a luxury look about them, got a luxury feel about them. And so the price we are paying, the price that the manufacturer is asking for them, seems like a reasonable price for what you get. A further example, the Fiat 500e, $52,000. Again, premium materials, Italian styling and all that sort of stuff, but nevertheless, $52,000. Bear in mind, again, as I said, $39,857 is the median average price for a new car. And if we said we were generous and said somewhere between $39,000 and $45,000, then we're still a long way outside that price range with a car that's $52,000, and we're a long way out with a car that's $111,000. Another new car that's an electric car that's been announced for the Australian, fully electric vehicle that have been announced for the Australian market is the Mercedes EQB 350 4MATIC, which is a mouthful. There are several variants of this car, from 5-seaters to 7-seaters, and the 5-seaters, I believe, start at around $67,000, and the 7-seaters top out at $106,700. Again, bearing in mind what I've said about the average price keep in mind here that according to statistics that I've just looked up today, the average annual salary in Australia is $90,800. Now, I'm sure there are blokes, or people, they're not blokes, but people who are watching this video are scratching their head and saying, my salary's nowhere near that. There are some people who are saying, well, I earn a lot more than that, so I'm okay, and I can afford an $111,000 vehicle. But there are lots of people who are saying, I can't afford an $111,000 vehicle, and my salary isn't that. Now, among the other vehicles that have been announced for the Australian market in the recent past is the BYD Dolphin, which tops out at $44,890. Now, as I said, I'm not here to tell you to buy any particular brand. I'm not spruiking a particular brand. I'm not saying any particular model's better than another. And I'm certainly not saying everybody should drive a Chinese vehicle, because that's not what I'm saying. It's, your right is to drive and buy whatever car you want. You're being told by the government that if you buy certain cars, you'll pay a premium for them, and your manufacturer may pay a penalty if their car is not clean and green. Now, you might ask yourself, or you might say to yourself, well, the reason that the Chinese can make these cars at this price is because the cars are rubbish, yet all the reviews I've read of the BYD Dolphin Premium and other Chinese electric cars by these people that are paid to review cars, they say the materials are premium quality, the fit and build is good quality, the performance is pretty good, the range is pretty good, the warranties are excellent. They're not the cheap and cheerful crap that we used to consider early Korean models to be, and early Japanese models going back into the early 60s. These are cars that, according to these reviewers, not me, but according to the reviewers, they're saying they are well put together, they're well made, there are no rattles and squeaks in them, they've got good range, they've got a good after sales service, good warranties, and they feel like well made cars when you sit in them. So you might say, well, how can they afford to make them at that price? Because labour costs in China are very low. And that is certainly true compared to Australia or United States or Canada or Europe. The cost of labour in China is quite low. However, you should consider that Kia, for one, have factories in China. Tesla have factories in China. Other major car manufacturers that I've mentioned, Hyundai, Mercedes, Toyota, for example, have factories in places like Thailand, Mexico and South Africa, just to name 3 countries where those brands make their cars. Now, the labour costs in each of those jurisdictions would be considerably lower than they are in Australia, in North America, or certainly in United States or Canada, and in Europe. So how is it that the Chinese can make a reasonably ranged electric vehicle and put on the market for $45,000, or it's $44,890 plus on-road costs? So let's say $46,000, $47,000 drive away, whereas in some cases the lowest price of a Mercedes is $64,000, the lowest price of a Mini Countryman is $64,000. Hyundai, okay, I get it, they're not making the cheap and cheerful Korean cars they once were making, but they're making a car here that's $111,000. Kia, as I've said, with their EV9, but even the EV6, I believe, is something like $99,000. Now, I get it that car companies are in the business of making profit. I get it that they say the margins on cars are low and they make the money on how you finance the car, and they hope that you finance it through their agency rather than getting a bank loan or paying cash or whatever it is that you do other than financing it through them. But the point I guess I'm trying to make here more strongly than anything else is to say, well, if electric cars are going to be part of the future, if we are going to reduce our carbon emissions, if we're going to meet our international agreements, and if we're going to have cleaner air in our cities, and this is one of the reasons why we would want electric cars to sell in large numbers, is it would have cleaner air in our cities. If we want those things to happen, they can only happen if people buy electric vehicles in large numbers. in large numbers means it's got to be affordable. Affordable appears to be somewhere between $39,000 and about $45,000. Now, I get it if you've got $106,000 to put down on a new car or $111,000 to put down on a new car, you probably don't need to worry about the cost of the car. But if you are a family that needs a 5-seater or a 7-seater, you certainly, in my estimation, don't have the money to $135,000 or $111,000 to plonk down on a car. You have something like $40,000 to put down on your car, and you hope that car is going to meet your needs in terms of how much room it's got in it, how much space it's got in it, how many people it can accommodate, and how long, getting you around the city and doing the things that you want to do. Now, lots of people are going to say, but we're a family, we need a big car. Again, something for you to consider. Australians drive an average of 36.4 kilometres per day in 2020. Okay, so that's 4 years ago. So let's say it's gone up to 38.5 or something. That's 36.4. So that means you're driving 18.2 kilometres there and 18.2 kilometres back, or thereabouts. So you're needing a big car to go a long way. For what purpose? Where are you going? Okay, on the weekend you're going around town, taking the kids to sport and visiting friends and family, or visiting grandma and grandpa or whatever. But if your average is 36.4, you don't necessarily need a huge car to accommodate large numbers of people. The average Australian household is 2.59 children. And that number, by the way, is consistent across all modern countries. It's the same number or about the same number in New Zealand, in the United States, in Canada, in the United Kingdom, in the rest of Europe, in Japan and in Korea. And I made the point in an earlier video, in fact, that in 34% of cases in Korea, 34% of households are single-person households. I don't know what the number is in Australia, but where is this idea that there are people that need 7-seater cars or even 5-seater cars? But let's say that you're a family of 3. So there's mum and dad and 1 child. Or there's mum and dad and 3 children. So you've got a 5-seater. You can fit all your people in there. You can fit your stuff that you need each day, school bags and stuff to go to school. And on the weekend, perhaps if you economise a little bit, everybody doesn't need to take their entire wardrobe if you're going away for the weekend. But it may well be that the small car does what it needs to do during the week, and you keep the bigger car, the bigger petrol car, for those weekend trips or holidays, or attaching the boat or the caravan or whatever it is that you have like that will take you on your weekend trip. So there are my thoughts about new vehicle emission standards. There are my thoughts about some of the new electric models that are coming on the market. As I say, if you have a comment or you have an opinion, then please offer it in the feedback or in the comment section at the end of the video, and when I become aware of it, I will respond. And it might be just something as simple as thank you for watching and commenting. I'll leave you now as I just to enjoy the little bit of scenery on the way to my home, and I will talk to you again when I'm preparing the next video. So thank you for watching.